Well, good afternoon. My thanks to our hosts for the opportunity to present the European Court of Auditors report on EU nuclear decommissioning assistance programmes in 3 specific member states, Lithuania, Bulgaria and Slovakia. I should say that with me today in the audience is my head of task, Pekka Ulander. He's very special. He's both a qualified financial auditor and a former nuclear inspector. And Katerina Bryan, the attaché in my private office. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank them both for the enormous hard work they and the team who are not here today put into this fact-based piece of audit analysis of what we found in these 3 member states. I will simply cover the audit, its findings, and our recommendations. I should say that it was published on 20 September of last year. I presented it to the Cont Committee of the European Parliament, on which Mr. Javor sits. Apologies, you have to listen to the same things twice, but on the 29th of November. It was a follow-up to our earlier special report, which has been mentioned 5 years before, in 2011. So this study was basically coming back, as auditors do, 5 years later, to see whether anything had happened, to see what progress had been made. The audit work covered a period up until April 2016. So no doubt, even in the world of nuclear decommissioning, there may have been some developments in the period of 10 months since the audit work closed. But I do believe that many of the report's findings are still relevant for today's seminar. The closure and subsequent decommissioning of Soviet-designed first-generation nuclear reactors in the 3 member states was made a condition for the accession of each of these 3 member states. I should say Lithuania has a particular challenge. It's a relatively small member state with no ongoing nuclear energy business and with 2 Chernobyl-style reactors to decommission, which has never been done before. Chernobyl, you'll realise, after the disaster, has been covered with a sarcophagus. It has not been decommissioned. The EU therefore agreed to provide financial support starting in 1999. By 2020, EU support for nuclear decommissioning activities will total almost 3 billion euros, the bottom left-hand number on this slide as you look at it, with Lithuania receiving about half of that money. So we examined progress since 2011. I should say, and this is the important thing for any auditor to say, what we did not do. We did not cover compliance issues, legality and regularity, public procurement issues, and safety issues. Those are potentially all significant in and of themselves, but those are for other studies. And we in no way sought to make the case for or against nuclear energy, nor to draw conclusions on the EU's energy supply mix. That's not the job of auditors. Our audit methodology was to visit each of the 3 nuclear plants and to interview those listed. I personally visited the plants in Lithuania and Bulgaria, met with key Commission officials and EBRD officials, and visited the geological repository being prepared in Finland. So to our findings. Well, we found some progress had thankfully been made since 2011. The dismantling in lower radiation level areas, such as in dismantling turbine halls, is well advanced. But critical challenges lie ahead in higher radiation areas, such as dismantling the reactors. We concluded that dedicated EU funding programmes for nuclear decommissioning have not created the right incentives for timely and cost-effective decommissioning. And by the end of 2015, not all of the expected outputs used by the European Commission to assess progress towards so-called irreversible closure had been fully met, as shown in this slide, I should add that the decommissioning licence for units 3 to 4 in Bulgaria was obtained in July of last year, so one of these boxes has now gone from yellow to green, but it's still a pretty mixed picture. On waste management, 3 member states have again made some progress, but many key infrastructure projects have experienced delays. The longest delays have been in Lithuania, where the decommissioning end date has, since 2011, been postponed by a further 9 years to 2038. Challenges remain in decommissioning in each of the 3 member states. This slide in the middle simply gives one example, but there are more, of a major project delayed in each member state. And we found that talks in all 3 on potential final disposal solutions for high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel were still only at the conceptual stage. So, overall, we concluded that the estimated cost of decommissioning these nuclear reactors will be at least 5.7 billion euros in total. That's the number in the top right-hand corner of this table. The financing gap between decommissioning costs and financing in Lithuania has increased by over 1.5 billion euros since 2011, alongside 28 million in Bulgaria and 92 million in Slovakia. So Lithuania is the big issue here. Member states' co-financing remains very limited. Staff levels have declined, but some EU funds are still being used, for example, in Lithuania, not for decommissioning, but for the cost of staff working on plant maintenance. No decommissioning plans give the full costs involved in nuclear closures. They do not include the cost of the final disposal of high-level waste and spent fuel. So we decided that we would also estimate the total cost. If you focus on the right-hand column of this table, the first line shows the 5.7 billion euro cost of decommissioning these reactors. Adding the cost estimate for the final disposal of high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel would double that to the number 2 places lower in the middle on the right-hand side, taking it from 5.7 to at least 11.4 billion euros. I think that matches the broader picture we were given by the JRC this morning of a doubling in the cost when you take into account the costs of high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel disposal. So this is a practical example of that. We found the Commission's assessment as to whether the financing and decommissioning plans fulfilled the so-called ex-ante conditionalities was inadequate, as had its own internal auditors. The future costs of nuclear decommissioning and final disposal are not always recognised as provisions and/or notes to the accounts. This may sound like an auditor worrying about something that only he should care about, but I do believe in this case it is very important. It limits transparency and hampers relevant authorities' ability to take responsibility and to plan. The Commission's reply to our report said completion was expected of 2 important assessments by October 2016 and by end 2016. The Commission did indeed send its assessment of the ex-ante conditionalities to the European Parliament's Budget Control Committee by the end of November of last year, and we await the Commission's assessment of national programmes, which I think I heard Gerasimus say should emerge now in the first quarter of this year, which we look forward to seeing. So, what is to be done? Well, we made 8 recommendations, which I'll briefly show to you in the following slides. I'm not going to read them all out. I will simply highlight our recommendations in 3 key areas relating to disposal of high-level waste, financing, and accounting. So the first of these, 2A, our recommendation on final disposal. was quite simply that the Commission should, with all the relevant EU member states, explore options for the disposal of spent fuel and high-level waste, including any regional and other EU-based solutions, obviously duly considering safety, security, cost-effectiveness of the alternatives, and that the Commission should include a review of this matter in its first report to this Parliament and the Council on the implementation of the Radioactive Waste Directive. Turning to financing, we made 3 recommendations. The first, number 3 here, said that the 3 member states concerned in this study should recognise their own role in ensuring that the polluter pays principle is respected and be prepared to use national funds to cover decommissioning costs, as well as the cost of final disposal, both in the current financing period before 2020 and thereafter. Recommendation 4 said the Commission should seek increases in national co-financing during the current financing period. And finally, and I just want to talk this one through, we said that dedicated funding programmes for nuclear decommissioning from the EU in Lithuania, Bulgaria and Slovakia should be discontinued after 2020. What did we mean by that? Well, we did say that if a clear need for the use of EU funds beyond 2020 is established in one or maybe more of the 3 member states, any future EU funding proposed by the Commission and agreed by the legislator should include the right incentives to pursue decommissioning, in other words, to actually get the work done, including by making sure that it's time limited and that it's based on appropriate levels of member state co-financing. So they've got some skin in the game to give them the incentive to get on with the work. One way to do this, and again, this may not be immediately comfortable for some in the room, but it's the only thing I could think of, would be to consider widening access to the European structural and investment funds to allow nuclear decommissioning activities to be covered, fulfilling these conditions. There's no doubt that this work has to be done and will have to be funded somehow because the waste is there now and it's not safe or sensible to leave it untreated. Finally, I just want to end on our recommendation 8, which was actually, I'm grateful to him, highlighted by Mr. Yavor this morning, and this is the final auditor's point, if you like, that the Commission should work with all the relevant member states so that all future costs associated with nuclear decommissioning and the final disposal of spent fuel are accounted for properly in a transparent manner consistent with relevant accounting standards. Sounds very simple, but I think in 1 or 2 of the other talks we've heard today, for some curious reason, it doesn't seem to be happening everywhere at the moment, and it would make everyone's life a lot more simple in this business if we had that real accounting and auditing transparency. Thank you for listening.